Today, I'm joined by DP Paul de Lumen, whose work on Propeller One Way Night Coach gives John Travolta's deeply personal aviation story a real sense of wonder, texture, and emotional lift. Paul, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Rob.
So let's talk about your work on this film. It opens with this incredible sense of atmosphere, the family heading to the airport, that soft, almost dreamlike light, and the period detail just kind of breathing in the frame. How did you
Right.
approach building that feeling from the very first scene?
Right. When I first talked to John about the story, what we really connected on was the childlike wonder of the character Jeff and his fascination with planes and his excitement to see this propeller plane, which in his mind is beautiful and gorgeous and majestic. And I think as kids, we all have these items or things you have in your head that you want to see and this excitement everybody can relate to. And I talked deeply in depth with John about that feeling and also the miracle of aviation in itself, apart from the boys' curiosity and wonder, just the fact that jet travel now is taken for granted. There's so many people in the sky, but it's every time I lift off, I look out the window and I'm imagining, wow, we're going up in a plane driven by these jet engines, and
Yeah.
those two story elements in particular really drove the ethos and the visual language of the film. And so I really wanted it to feel, we both really wanted it to feel as if the audience were seeing the world from Jeff's point of view. And one of our references was a little children's book that John actually had when he was little. It's called Gordon's First Jet Flight. And if you turn through the pages, there's actually a page of the boy, his grandma, and his mom in the front seat of a car. And I framed that shot up exactly like it is in the children's book. So I'm glad that you noticed that because a lot of my framing was kind of based on this children's book that is easy to see. Like obviously we have John's voice narrating it, but also wanted it to feel exciting and nostalgic. So those were the core elements that we really talked about in the beginning. And then, yeah, Gordon's Jet Flight was the children's book that we referenced. And then we also talked about Mad Men, of course, the TV series, which
Yeah.
was captured that time period really beautifully. Our time period is 1962. And then Catch Me If You Can, the Spielberg movie. And we both really liked the film stock that was used on those movies. It was Kodak Vision 2, had like a little bit of grain in it, not too much. And in Catch Me If You Can, um, I love the softness of the lenses. And so that's what I incorporated in mine. So that's why the highlights have a little bit of a dreamy feel to it. And then also drawing on the nostalgic part, we also loved Edward Hopper, the American painter. He does kind of these lonely scenes in the 60s. There's lots of green, a lot of warm top light in those paintings. And between Gordon's Jeff Light, Edward Hopper, Mad Men, and Catch Me If You Can, I kind of combined all these things to create a new language for Propeller. And I just wanted it to feel nostalgic and magical. So,
Well, I think you nailed it.
right.
It was maybe seductive is not the right word, but it's a really
Sure.
alluring, comforting, beautifully dreamlike state that we embark on immediately. And I'm like, yes,
Right
I
on.
am ready. I'm ready. Um, but we mentioned a child's point of view. Obviously, that is a very important structure to the way that you've shot this. What does that actually mean for you on set in terms of where the camera sits, how it moves, and what you choose to let us notice?
Yeah, totally. I think the first priority I had was actually to keep the lens at the boy's eye level. So whenever I set the lens at anything that he noticed, whether it was the PA speaker, the clock, or the tickets, or the control panels and the pilot's cockpit, I always kept it at his eye level. And even when there's a scene with the crazy guy, and he's looking from the bed, and I talked to John. I was like, we're just going to cover it from this long lens, from the boy's point of view. We don't need any coverage in there. We always want to see everything from his point of view. So it's akin to Rear Window, Alfred Hitchcock, where it's always from one point of view, which in that movie is like the window in the building. But in our story, it's Jeff's height, always the lens. And then if he notices something, then I just use a longer lens to capture it. And then working with a child, of course, we only have 8 hours of time, which is reduced to 4 because we have schooling, of course. So what we did was on set, we shot all the angles on him first. Um, and then after he was wrapped, then we shot everything that he was looking at and also any
Wow.
coverage of the other actors. So that was the most efficient way to go through our days and keep the visual integrity of the piece.
I had no idea. Obviously, there's a the constraint on time when you're working with child actors. The magic of
Yeah,
filmmaking, we would never have known. It's so interesting that you're able to find ways around the constraints to make it work for a production like this. That is, I imagine, would be running on two frequencies at once. The logistics of a very
yeah.
compressed shoot, but also the huge emotional tenderness of a child discovering flight. So, how do you keep the film connected to that feeling of awe, rather than
For
just the
sure.
mechanics of getting it done?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually goes all the way down to my crew, like the camera, lighting crew. Even before we hit the set, we talked about working with children and to keep everything very professional, very, calm. Even if there was an emergency, let's talk over here and not on set. Like we wanted the energy to always encapsulate um, a child being excited, for the plane, but then also just being an actor on set, being directed by John. That's pretty fun and
Wow.
amazing. So
Like,
like,
hello.
yeah, Clark Shotwell, our actor, was great. Such a charming little boy, and and the crew, of course, helped me with that. And John was very much the leader in creating the vibe, the comforting and supportive, creative vibe on set. And I was thankful to have a crew that was on the same page in providing that atmosphere for our kid to really blossom and emote the energy that we want from the story.
Yeah. You know, I have to admit to you, by the way, John Travolta is one of my heroes. I just
Oh,
admire him so much. And
yeah, yeah.
I know that when you had your first call with John, that you instantly connected. How much did that, or like, let me reframe, how much did you value that connection as a way to make bolder and more confident choices?
Oh, 100%. It made me so happy that I could connect with him on those core values of the script. And it gave me confidence to really work with him because I could tell that he knew that I could tell that he knew that I knew the story and that I was protecting it with him. So if I
Mm,
were bringing up a choice, that I'd be like, John, I think like this angle would be better, or maybe we could push in here. And our conversations were always coming from a place of protecting that energy of the story. And I think making that connection early, I was able to establish that trust, which meant the world to me. And then kudos to John. He's such a great creative communicator. Oftentimes, directors will know what they want, but they'll struggle to get it out, whether it's verbally or like with the mood board. But John, obviously, it's a personal story, so he knows every single detail. But he's just a great communicator, and I really appreciated that about him. And he's a very calm and kind person in general. So it was such a pleasure just working out and improving the story. And then if there was any like troubles, like we were working on set in LA on the jet. It's called Air Hollywood. It's a set in Valencia, and there was a wildfire that started in the morning and it was coming closer and closer. And by lunchtime, the crew and John and I were a bit scared, like what to do, and we decided to shoot one more shot, which was the master shot you see of the team deboarding the plane, and we just needed one more shot, and it was actually John's single, and he was in full makeup with the captain's hat and everything, and we look at each other, and he's like, people have seen my face so many times. We don't need this single. We're fine. Let's wrap. Let's get out of here. So we wrapped early. We evacuated. Thankfully, everybody was fine. The soundstage was fine, but that day was pretty crazy. And I give a lot of props to my crew for being calm the whole time, and even evacuating out of there was really smooth. And you could, as soon as we left the soundstage, you could see this wall of smoke coming in from the side, so it felt very apocalyptic.
My
But
God.
yeah, so if you
Like,
see that
yeah.
scene, yeah, I could feel the pressure of the wildfire coming from outside, and we pivoted, and we actually had built a toy store set, which I'm sure you saw in the movie. And Chelsea Turner, our production designer, did a great job of building the set in that studio. But we were going to shoot that in the afternoon, and we had to evacuate, so we couldn't shoot there. And so we went back to the production office, which was in Hollywood, about maybe 15 miles away. And we looked, and there was a room with a window, and we decided to just dress the set there. So within 3 or 4 hours, we had a different set built. And I talked about it with John, and just the angles and the way it came together, like this might even look better than what we had in the other soundstage. So
Wow.
it was it was just goes to show that coming from the top down from John, just the calmness and the creative attitude of the team was really beneficial in not only getting it technically and logistically, but it also we were able to maintain the right atmosphere for the actors and Clark, our lead. So I'm really proud of the team for doing that.
I'll say again the magic of filmmaking, like the fact that there's a solutions focus. Like we have a wildfire. This is life or death, but
Yeah,
we do
yeah,
need to get
exactly.
this film done.
Yeah,
Let's do it over in the
exactly.
production office.
Yeah,
Like that's
exactly.
nuts in the best
It
possible
is.
way. Like
Yeah,
it's so
it
good.
is.
It's so good. I will say as well, like I was reading a lot of the coverage in Cannes at the Cannes Film Festival, and John saying how this was way too personal of a story for him to hand off the film to somebody else, and it
Sure.
was
Yeah.
one of the most personal films of his life. So, what does that kind of intimacy ask of you as a collaborator? You have spoken about it already, but I just wonder, day to day, were there moments where you had to calibrate how you were going to approach something, knowing how much it meant to him personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think across the board, I was very respectful of the material because I knew that it was a combination of his family, his siblings, his mom's friends, and also they were all on set with us, because they were acting
Mm,
in it. So it was like
yeah.
his brothers and sisters were in there, and I was constantly interacting with them and learning about the stories behind the script, and it just gave an extra level of candidness or authenticity on
Mhm.
set, which I really respected. And to have those side conversations with his siblings was so fun. To hear about stories when they were kids together, and then when his older sister bought him the ticket as a Christmas present, John had thought that that ticket was just a fake ticket because he collected like airplane tickets. And when
Yeah.
his sister told him that was a real ticket, and they were just going to like Boston, I think it was Boston or Delaware to Boston, he was elated. Obviously, like Jeff in the story. But yeah, just to have his family around on set and to talk about those stories in real life was a really beautiful thing to me, and it helped me respect the material even more.
Yeah. There's some gloriously ambitious shots in this film. I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about that exterior shot moving across the airplane windows until it lands on
Oh,
Jeff and his mum. How the hell did
yeah.
you pull that off?
Oh my gosh, that was probably the hardest shot. We tried it in New York. We didn't have enough time. We had the right techno crane. It was a beautiful crane, and then we had this drop down extension on it, but it was too cold and we ran out of time, and we had to move inside, so we didn't get it done there. And so our next chance was in Kansas City, and the closest techno crane was in Atlanta, so it was too far to get to where we were. We used actually a regular jib, and we backed off the jib a lot and used a longer lens. So that was our solution in the end. And John was very particular about that shot because it mimics what the toy does. How the toys windows, they open and you can see the passengers, and then they close, and then the propellers go, and then it slides off. So he wanted to match that with his shot. And so,
Wow.
um, talking with Jason, our producer, like, this is, like, we got to get this right. So when we set it up in Kansas, and we each of them sat down perfectly, and then Clark sat down with Kelly in the last seat. We were so happy that it worked out in the end.
Yeah, it's incredible. I want to talk shot with you for a bit because I always like to ask DPs this question. When you're deciding on your shot composition, how do you know whether to go overhead or like super proximate so that we can get into the person's eyes or just track
Sure.
and circle a character? Is it all just dependent on story, or do you have your own set of internal rules that you like to follow?
It's for me, it's totally dependent on story. If I'm not serving the story, then I'm being a show-off cinematographer. And I could do that for a commercial or music video, which is totally fine. But the visual language of a feature should be in service of the story always. As much as we love extravagant or complicated shots, like this is Jeff's story. And so that dictates where I put the lens. And I'm not going to get a wide angle close up of any of those people because Jeff is not going to be in their face like this. So
Yeah,
Jeff is going to be a couple of feet away, So I'm selecting lenses that reflect his point of view. Um, and yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any that really steer away from that. I think we stayed true to that, unless we're
mm,
looking at Jeff, which is more observational. I'll do like a push in on him, but we didn't do anything too dramatic, and we didn't cut away to anything that was happening away from him.
yeah.
Um, John was like, we don't need that. Jeff didn't notice that. So we don't need coverage over there. We don't need to put the camera over there. And that, to me, that made total sense. So I feel like we succeeded in keeping it from his point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay true to that particular way of looking through his eyes. It really does
Yeah.
work. So after something this compressed, technically demanding, and so tied to memory and innocence, how do you feel it helped you evolve as a cinematographer?
That's great question. I feel like it helps me stay in tune with my own childlike curiosity and magic. As adults, we oftentimes get jaded in whatever job we do. And as artists, it's so important to always protect that. And this job was very much doing that in a very professional way, but also in a very authentic way to myself. And I think that's the artist's double-edged sword because we're sensitive and we care, but it also makes it draining because we give so much to our craft, and that goes for actors as well, especially. So I think for me, this really helped fine tune that ability to tap into that childlike wonder and magic, but also work in a very professional adult way, kind of having like a split brain in the sense as a DP. And I think the best directors I work with are able to tap into that. When I see them look at the monitor, I see this childlike excitement of getting the story right or getting the performance right. And you see a kid like right there, like just so happy about something they created, and that those are the best moments. And as a DP, to be able to have that mutual relationship with the director has been one of the most beautiful things about filmmaking. And this piece with John has really kind of solidified that with me and helped me process that and use it in ways that are healthy to me.
Wow. This film is such a lovingly handcrafted piece of visual memory, and your work gives it so much of its heart, atmosphere, and lift. Paul, thank you so much for your time today.
Right on. Thank you, Rob.